Hi Sax Gourmet fans, and greetings from our ultra top secret command and control bunker here in the birthplace of jazz, New Orleans. I'm Steve Goodson, and I'm going to talk to you today about how to oil your saxophone. Now, before we do this, there's something you got to know. To really do the perfect job of oiling your saxophone, what you got to do is take it completely apart and clean off the screws and clean out the interior of the hinge tubes and the faces of all the keys and really get all the old oil and grit and dirt removed. Now, I'm going to assume you know how to do that. If you don't know how to do it, you got no business trying it. So take it to somebody who does. And get your horn really clean before you oil it for the first time. Now that you've done that, let's talk about why we got to oil our saxophone. Well, it's machinery. It's a mechanism. It's metal rubbing against metal. And you paid a lot of money for that horn. So if you want it to last for a long time, you got to have a nice layer of lubrication between the two metal surfaces that contact, and inside all the keys. And also, you need to keep a coat of oil on all the springs. Now, it's important to get a good understanding of what's a good oil to use and what's a bad oil to use. Well, something I see all the time is people that have oiled their horns with 3-in-1 oil. 3-in-1 is awful stuff. It leaves a gunky residue inside the keywork, and that actually slows down the action. Another thing I see from time to time is guys that use trumpet valve oil or trombone slide oil to oil their horn, and that stuff's too thin, and it has a volatile component in the oil that evaporates, so before too long you don't have any protection at all. What you need is an oil that is slightly thick, but more importantly than anything else, it's got to be a high detergent oil. Did you hear me? It's got to have a detergent component. It's got to clean itself every time you oil your horn. If it doesn't do that, all you're going to do is rinse the grit and the dirt down into the keywork, and before long, you're going to be visiting the repair shop and paying for some very expensive repairs to get your horn swedged and get the keywork fit back right. So, high detergent only. If it's not high detergent, don't buy it. So, we've got the oil defined. Now, let's look at what we've got to do to prep our horn for oiling. Okay, now saxophone players, before we oil the horn, assuming we got all the keywork interiors clean, here's the next and final step we got to do before we apply the oil. We got to take a soft brush. Now I use this particular old barber's brush for this point, but if you got an old paintbrush that's nice and soft, that'll work just fine. And we want to give it a good thorough brushing to knock all that gunk off the keywork, all the dust, all the lint, all that stuff off the keywork in the springs. This is real important because that junk is going to impede the flow of the oil. So get yourself a paintbrush or maybe one of these cool old barber's brushes and just brush the whole thing down and get it nice and clean. All right, now here's what you got to do. You got to get yourself what's known in the trade as a pen oiler. And that's a bottle of the right type of key oil. Remember, it's got to be high detergent with a hypodermic needle end. And we've just changed the design of the one we sell on our Steve's Bourbon Street Key Oil and made it a little longer because we want to be able to get at all the joints in the keywork. Then we want to take our oiler and at every gap of the keywork, every single gap, I want to put 1 drop of oil. And I want to do this once a month. That's 1 drop once a month. Now, about an hour or so after you put the oil on, you may find some kind of black gunky deposits at the gaps, and that's a good thing. Take a Q-tip and dab them off. That's gunk that was living inside your keys, and it's got to go. Now, once you've got all the key work oiled, then there's one more thing you got to do. And this is something most people forget. Take your pin oiler and put 1 drop of oil on every needle spring and let it run down the entire length of the spring. The key springs should always have a nice thin coat of oil on them. And as that oil gets down to the nipple on the key where the key spring contacts it, what'll happen is it'll make your horn ever so much quieter. It'll take a lot of the clickety clank out of the mechanism, and you'll enjoy playing your horn a lot more. You'll notice a difference right away in the way your horn feels. This is important. Just like you got to change the oil in your car, you got to keep your saxophone oiled. So, this is Steve Goodson reminding you to get some Bourbon Street key oil at nationofmusic.com and take good care of your saxophone. Goodbye for now.